My name is Hattie. And the moment I watched Richard's face drain of color as the lawyers laid out the patent documents on that polished boardroom table, I knew every sleepless night had been worth it. He'd fired me 6 months earlier with a smirk that still haunted my dreams, telling me I was replaceable and that my little inventions belonged to the company. But as the cease and desist order slid across the mahogany surface toward him, his hands trembling as he reached for it, I realized something profound. Revenge isn't about anger. It's about being so thoroughly, devastatingly right that silence becomes your enemy's only option. Have you ever trusted someone so completely that their betrayal felt like losing a limb? Let me back up. 3 years before that beautiful moment of reckoning, I was a different person entirely. I joined Meridian Technologies fresh out of graduate school, clutching my PhD in biomedical engineering like a golden ticket. My parents had immigrated from Ghana with nothing but determination and 2 suitcases, working double shifts so I could have the education they never did. My father fixed cars in a cramped garage. My mother cleaned office buildings at night. They taught me that intelligence without hard work was just potential, and hard work without integrity was just noise. Richard Castellanos was the company's golden boy, the innovation director everyone admired. Tall, charismatic, always the one giving inspiring speeches about disrupting the industry and changing lives through technology. When he took me under his wing during my first week, I felt chosen, special. He'd stop by my lab bench, ask about my weekend, actually listen when I talked about the neural interface project I was developing. He made me feel like I mattered in a company of 200 people where I was just another researcher. I was 26 and naive enough to believe that competence and loyalty would be rewarded, that a company would value the person who stayed until midnight calibrating equipment, who volunteered for the projects no one else wanted, who turned theoretical concepts into working prototypes. I poured everything into Meridian, birthdays, weekends, holidays, all sacrificed at the altar of innovation. My boyfriend at the time, Marcus, left me after I missed our anniversary dinner for the third year running. "You love that lab more than you love anything real," he said before walking out. He wasn't entirely wrong. The neural interface I developed, what I privately called the Prometheus system, was revolutionary. It allowed precise communication between brain signals and prosthetic limbs with a clarity no one had achieved before. The key breakthrough was in the signal processing algorithm I developed, using a cascade filtering method combined with predictive modeling that reduced lag time to nearly zero. But here's the thing about innovation in corporate America. The line between your work and company property is written in contracts most people don't read carefully enough. I'd read mine, every word, multiple times. When I joined Meridian, their standard employment agreement had a clause about intellectual property. Anything developed using company resources belonged to the company. Standard practice, reasonable enough. But I'd noticed something interesting. The contract specified during work hours and using company equipment and materials. So I made a choice. The foundational algorithm, the real heart of Prometheus, I developed at home, on my personal computer, during weekends and evenings, using my own research and my own time. I kept meticulous records, time-stamped files, purchase receipts for my home computer upgrades, a detailed lab notebook with dates and locations. Was it paranoid? Maybe. My father had always said, "Trust people, but keep receipts." His garage had been swindled twice by partners who claimed they'd contributed more than they had. He'd learned to document everything. I'd inherited that wariness along with his work ethic. For 2 years, I brought Meridian success after success. The Prometheus system moved from concept to prototype to clinical trials. Richard took me to conferences, introduced me to investors, let me present at board meetings. I felt like I was building something meaningful. The patients in our trials, veterans who'd lost limbs in combat, accident survivors learning to live with prosthetics. They'd cry when the interface worked, when they could feel texture again through synthetic fingers, when they could walk smoothly instead of lurching. That's what kept me going through the exhaustion. Then Meridian got acquired. A Silicon Valley venture capital firm called Titan Ventures bought us for $200 million. The announcement came on a Tuesday morning, champagne in the conference room, Richard grinning like he'd won the lottery. The new owners promised nothing would change. They always promise that. 3 weeks later, the layoffs started. Restructuring, they called it. 20% of the workforce gone in a single afternoon, escorted out by security with their belongings in cardboard boxes. I survived that cut. Richard assured me I was safe. "You're too valuable," he said, squeezing my shoulder like a mentor, like a friend. "They know what you've built here." I wanted to believe him. I needed to believe him. The Prometheus system was entering phase 3 trials. We were 6 months from FDA approval, 6 months from changing lives on a massive scale. 4 months later, Richard called me into his office on a Friday afternoon. The office that used to be cluttered with prototypes and coffee cups now looked sterile, corporate. He sat behind his desk with someone I'd never met, a thin woman in an expensive suit with sharp eyes and sharper smile. "Hattie, this is Diane Fletcher, Titan's Chief Operations Officer," Richard said, not meeting my eyes. "We need to discuss some changes." Changes? That word carries such polite menace. Diane spoke in that smooth, practiced voice executives use when delivering bad news. Meridian was pivoting to a leaner operational model. They were consolidating redundancies. My position was being eliminated. I'd receive a severance package, 4 months' salary, standard benefits extension. All I had to do was sign the termination agreement by Monday. I looked at Richard. He was studying his desk like it contained the secrets of the universe. "Richard?" I said quietly. He finally looked up and I saw nothing. No regret, no discomfort, just nothing. "It's business, Hattie," he said. "The decision came from above." "The Prometheus trials." "Will continue," Diane interrupted smoothly. "We have excellent engineers who can manage the final phase. Your contribution has been invaluable, truly, but the company is moving in a new direction." I felt something crack inside my chest. Not break, crack, like ice under pressure. "I see," I said. I didn't sign anything that day. I told them I needed the weekend to review the documents with a lawyer. Diane's smile tightened. "Of course, but the offer expires Monday at 5 p.m. Non-negotiable." I left the building in a daze, drove home on autopilot, sat in my apartment staring at the termination agreement, reading it over and over. Buried in the legal language was a poison pill. By signing, I agreed that all work related to my employment, including any and all inventions, improvements, or innovations developed during the term of employment, whether or not using company resources, belonged to Meridian. They were trying to take everything. Not just the work I'd done in their labs, but the foundational algorithm I developed independently. I didn't sleep that weekend. I called every lawyer I could find who specialized in intellectual property. Most were too expensive. One, a tired-looking woman named Patricia Chen, who worked out of a cramped office in Queens, listened to my story and smiled grimly. "They're getting greedy," she said. "Happens all the time with acquisitions. New owners trying to lock down anything valuable. Question is, can you prove you developed that algorithm independently?" "Yes," I said. "I have everything. Time-stamped files going back 3 years. Receipts, my personal lab notebook. I logged every session." Patricia leaned forward. "Here's what's going to happen. You're not going to sign their agreement. You're going to file a patent application for your algorithm immediately. We'll establish prior art, prove independent development. Then we'll see how brave they feel." "They'll sue me." "Probably. Can you handle a legal fight?" I thought about my parents, my father's garage that got rebuilt after the swindle, my mother still cleaning offices at 63 because retirement wasn't an option for people who'd started with nothing. "I don't have a choice," I said. Monday at 4:45 p.m., I walked into Richard's office and placed the unsigned termination agreement on his desk. "I'm not signing this," I said quietly. The intellectual property clause is overreaching. You're trying to claim work I did on my own time with my own resources. Richard's expression shifted from surprise to something uglier. Hattie, don't be stupid. Sign the agreement, take the severance, move on. You make this difficult, and we'll make sure you never work in this industry again. Is that a threat? It's reality. You think anyone will hire someone who sues their former employer? He stood up, suddenly towering. You were a good engineer, but you're replaceable. The Prometheus system will succeed with or without you. Sign the papers or leave with nothing. I met his eyes and saw the truth. I'd never mattered to him. Not as a colleague, not as a person. I was just a resource to be used and discarded. I'll leave with nothing then, I said. See you in court. The next 6 months were hell. I filed my patent application with Patricia's help, using every dollar of my meager savings. Meridian's lawyer sent threatening letters, cease and desist, claims that I'd stolen company secrets. They filed a lawsuit alleging breach of contract and theft of intellectual property. The legal bills piled up faster than I could count. I sold my car, moved into a studio apartment half the size of my old place, took contract work doing basic engineering consulting just to pay rent and legal fees. My mother cried when I told her what was happening. Why fight them? She asked. They have so much money, baby. You'll lose everything. But my father understood. Sometimes, he said slowly, you fight not because you'll win, but because losing without fighting means losing yourself. He took my hand. We'll help however we can. I lived on rice and beans, stopped going out, stopped sleeping properly. Every spare moment went into building my case with Patricia. We documented everything. The timeline of my algorithm's development, expert testimony from professors who'd reviewed my work, the original files from my home computer with metadata showing they predated my work at Meridian. We built an ironclad case, brick by brick. Meanwhile, Richard thrived. I watched from a distance as he got promoted to Vice President of Innovation. Meridian's press releases credited him with developing the Prometheus system. His face appeared in industry magazines. He gave TED Talks about innovation and disruption, never mentioning my name. The injustice of it burned like acid, but Patricia kept me focused. Let him have his moment, she said. Revenge is a dish best served with legal documentation. The breakthrough came 4 months in. One of Meridian's own engineers, a guy named Kevin who'd worked alongside me, reached out quietly. He was disgusted by how I'd been treated. He'd seen Richard present his work at internal meetings, claiming credit for innovations that clearly came from my research. Kevin had kept copies of internal emails, time-stamped, communications, showing that the core Prometheus algorithm had been described by me in personal notes before any company implementation. He was willing to testify. With Kevin's testimony, our case transformed. Patricia filed a motion to dismiss Meridian's lawsuit and simultaneously filed a counterclaim. They were using my patented technology without license. We demanded they cease all use of the Prometheus system until licensing terms could be negotiated. The patent office was still processing my application, but we had enough evidence of prior invention to make a strong claim. Meridian's lawyers laughed at us, literally. I heard about it through Kevin. They'd called our claim desperate and frivolous. They thought they could bury us in paperwork and legal fees until I gave up. They didn't know about the mortgage my parents took out on their small house to help fund my legal battle. They didn't know about Patricia working partially pro bono because she believed in the case. They didn't know I'd rather live in my car than surrender. Then my patent got approved. The algorithm that made Prometheus work, the cascade filtering method with predictive modeling, was officially mine. Patent number 10 Allen 847-392, issued to Hattie Mensah. The foundation crumbled beneath Meridian's case. Patricia scheduled a settlement conference. I'll never forget walking into that conference room at the mediator's office. Richard was there with Diane Fletcher and 3 lawyers in suits that cost more than my rent. They looked at me like I was an annoying insect that had somehow learned to file paperwork. The mediator, a gray-haired former judge named Morrison, reviewed the materials and frowned. "Ms. Fletcher," he said carefully, "you're aware the patent has been granted to Ms. Mensah?" "We're disputing the validity of that patent," Diane said smoothly. "The work was clearly derivative of company research." "The timestamp evidence suggests otherwise," Morrison said. "Ms. Mensah has documentation showing independent development dating back." "Fabricated documents can be backdated," Richard interrupted. "Your Honor, Hattie was a good engineer, but she's clearly—" "I'm not a judge anymore, Mr. Castellanos, and I'd advise you to let your lawyer speak." Morrison looked at Patricia. "What's your client seeking?" Patricia smiled. "Recognition of patent ownership, immediate cessation of use of the Prometheus system pending licensing negotiation, and damages for past unauthorized use." One of Meridian's lawyers laughed. Actually laughed. "You want us to stop Phase 3 trials that are weeks from completion? Trials that have cost us $40 million? That's absurd." "Then license the technology," Patricia said calmly. "Pay Ms. Mensah what she's owed." "She's owed nothing. She signed an employment contract, which didn't cover work done independently, on personal time, with personal resources." Patricia slid a thick folder across the table. "We have 3 years of documentation, computer forensics showing file creation dates, credit card receipts for equipment purchases, Dr. Mensah's personal lab notebooks, which she maintained separately from company records, testimony from a current Meridian engineer supporting the timeline, and now a granted patent. You can fight this if you want, but discovery is going to be very embarrassing for your company." I watched Diane's expression shift as she flipped through the folder. She was smart enough to see the trap closing. "We need to caucus," she said tightly. They left the room. Patricia squeezed my hand. "Stay calm," she whispered. "They're bleeding money on this trial. They'll deal." 20 minutes later, they came back. Diane's corporate smile was gone. "We're prepared to offer a licensing agreement," she said. "Retroactive to cover the trial period. 5% royalty on all Prometheus-related revenue." 12%, Patricia countered, plus recognition of Dr. Mensah as principal inventor in all documentation and publications, plus a formal apology. Richard's face went red. "This is extortion. This is intellectual property law," Patricia said pleasantly. "Your company used Dr. Mensah's patented technology without license. We can settle this professionally, or we can let a jury decide. Juries tend to sympathize with individual inventors over large corporations." The negotiation lasted 3 more hours. We settled at 9% royalties, full inventor recognition, and a written acknowledgement that I had developed the core algorithm independently. No formal apology. Diane wouldn't budge on that, but I didn't care. The money would change my life. The recognition would restore my reputation. The acknowledgement would expose Richard's theft. But I wasn't done. Not quite. "One more thing," I said quietly. Everyone looked at me. "I want to present the Prometheus results at the International Biomedical Engineering Conference in March, as the primary inventor." "Absolutely not," Richard said. "I'm scheduled to present those results." "With my algorithm," I said, meeting his eyes. "Using my technology. Under the licensing agreement, I retain certain presentation rights. I'll be professional. I'll credit the clinical team. But I'm presenting my work." Diane looked at her lawyers. They whispered urgently. Finally, she nodded. "Agreed. You present. Mr. Castellanos will introduce you and the clinical context." Richard looked like he'd swallowed glass. "Diane!" "It's done, Richard." Her voice carried warning. "Sign the agreement." 3 months later, I stood on stage at the international conference in front of 800 engineers and researchers. I'd used part of my settlement money to buy a proper suit. My mother had flown in to watch from the audience, crying before I'd even said a word. Richard sat in the front row, his smile plastic and dead. I presented everything: the theoretical framework, the algorithm development timeline, the clinical results that showed Prometheus restoring near-natural limb function. I showed videos of patients walking, writing, feeling again. The audience gasped. They applauded. Questions flew, and I answered them all with the precision of someone who'd lived inside this research for 3 years. When I finished, I added one slide that wasn't in the approved deck. It showed my patent number and a simple acknowledgement: core signal processing algorithm developed independently by Dr. Hattie Mensah, 2019 to 2021, licensed to Meridian Technologies 2024. The room went completely silent. Then someone in the back started clapping. Then someone else. Within seconds, the entire conference hall was on its feet. Not for Richard, not for Meridian, for me, for the truth. Richard left before the standing ovation finished. I never saw him again in person, though I heard through Kevin that he'd been quietly reassigned to a lesser role within 6 months. Turns out corporate vice presidents who get publicly exposed for claiming others' work don't last long. Diane Fletcher left Titan Ventures a year later. The company brought in new leadership that actually respected intellectual property rights. The Prometheus system got FDA approval 8 months after the conference. It's now used in 17 countries. Over 2,000 patients have regained functionality they thought they'd lost forever. My royalty payments let me pay off my parents' mortgage and start my own research lab. I hired Kevin as my first employee. Patricia Chen became my permanent legal counsel and close friend. Sometimes people ask if I regret fighting, if it was worth the stress, the poverty, the uncertainty. They don't understand. It was never about revenge. It was about refusing to let someone take what I'd built with my own hands, my own mind, my own sacrifice. It was about proving that integrity and documentation matter more than corporate power. It was about honoring my parents' example, that you work honestly, you keep records, and you never let anyone make you small. Richard taught me an important lesson, though I doubt he meant to. Betrayal reveals character. Mine, yes, but mostly his. He showed me that some people will smile while stealing from you, will mentor you while planning to discard you, will claim your work while erasing your name. But documentation is patient. Truth is persistent. And justice, when you fight for it intelligently and relentlessly, eventually arrives. I think about that moment in the boardroom sometimes, when Richard's hands trembled reaching for the cease and desist letter. Not with satisfaction, with clarity. I'd won not by being ruthless, but by being right. Not by destroying him, but by protecting what was mine. The best revenge isn't about making your enemies suffer. It's about building something so undeniably yours that when they try to take it, the truth becomes their punishment. I still work long hours, still sacrifice weekends for research. But now I do it in my own lab, under my own name, building things that will carry my parents' legacy forward. Every patent has their names in the acknowledgments. Every success is theirs, as much as mine. My father came to visit my lab last month, walked slowly through the equipment bays, touched the workbenches, looked at the patents framed on the wall. "You did good," he said quietly. "You kept receipts?" Then he smiled that careful smile and added, "But you did better than that. You kept yourself." That's the thing about revenge. Real revenge. It's not about becoming what hurt you. It's about refusing to let that hurt define you. Richard tried to make me smaller, replaceable, forgettable. Instead, every Prometheus device in every clinic carries my name. Every patient who walks smoothly, feels texture, regains independence. They're walking proof that some people can't be erased. Because the truth about betrayal is this: people can steal your work, claim your ideas, try to erase your contribution, but they can't steal your competence. They can't fake the late nights when you solve problems no one else could solve. They can't replicate the moment of insight that makes innovation possible. And if you're smart enough to document everything, patient enough to build your case, and brave enough to fight when everyone says you should surrender, then betrayal doesn't destroy you. It reveals who you always were, someone worth stealing from in the first place.